the sound on it?
The sound is primitive as well.
Right.
So the three of you just showed Danish Girl in Venice, and then you brought it to Toronto. Was there a difference in how the reaction? Any sense of a different audience?
Well, we kind of. I feel like we had a humbling experience in both cities. I mean, in Venice, we got this extraordinary standing ovation that went on the entire end credit roll. And when I mean the entire end credit roll, there was a point where the catering section was going past, and they were still on their feet, and I was kind of like, I don't think I've ever quite experienced the catering department getting applause. And Toronto. I mean, I love. This is the fourth film I brought here. The audience is always so warm and supportive at an incredibly kind of nervous-making moment for all of us, and you know, one feels such encouragement, and again we had an incredibly warm and wonderful response.
There's so many wonderful film and movie lovers here, and then to come in on stage and also have the privilege of having a Q&A and actually get the chance to communicate and to have their response and their questions, and that was very sweet. It was quite an overwhelming feeling being on that stage.
You mentioned anxiety. What makes you anxious about this? You're dealing with some very delicate, tricky, sort of not entirely safe territory.
Well, it's an interesting question. I think that when Tom gave me the script and I read it, I was astounded that I didn't know Lily and Gerda's story. I didn't realise that she was this extraordinary pioneer, but overwhelmingly what it felt like was there was great responsibility in playing such an extraordinary woman. And I think for us, whilst educating, or for me certainly, whilst educating myself to play Lily, I met many women from the trans community of different generations, and they educated me and allowed me to ask any question. But as one heard their stories, and every story was different, and there is no one trans story, and we heard the stories of their partners, one just got the sense of how iconic Lily is within the trans community, and of course that raises the stakes and you don't want to mess it up. So I think that anxiety is in that place. You feel responsibility to Gerda and Lily's memory, really.
You were playing around with gender in some cool ways. For example, your character, if I'm reading it right, is a little bit more masculine than many women of that period, a little more aggressive, assertive, coming into her own as an artist. And you, of course, are more feminine. You know, it's interesting.
Yeah, well, it's also interesting talking about, being masculine at that time, because it's more because it was so rare for a woman to, I mean, she's an artist, but she's a working woman, and in one way she has a husband. Or when Lily is Aina at the beginning of the film, I love that he's the one in the start supporting her, having a woman and a wife that is very much not the norm in society. So I think that also shows us what journey we need to go on in society, that you shouldn't maybe read that as masculine for a woman to have strength. And I've questioned my own both femininity and masculinity within myself, having made this film, and I've also realized, speaking to a lot of the wonderful people who have in the transgender community that I've spoken to, and also for me playing Gerda, maybe because I've been in contact with a lot of people who have been close to and relatives or loved and near and close persons to someone who has gone on Lily's journey in this film. And what I've realized is that gender is so fluent, and I don't even know where I put myself in that spectrum.
When you started this journey, and it's been going on for a while, it's become more timely than ever. You have a knack for this.
Well, I mean, in late 2008 when I first read the script, it was considered, a hard film to finance, and without naming any names, there were certainly people around me who were discouraging me from making the film because they didn't get it. And the thing that's I find it, and then when we did make it, we had to make it with a very tight budget. I mean, a similar budget to The King's Speech, $15 million budget. And what I love is that now people are saying it's an obvious film to make, and I hope that shows that there's been a shift in the culture where trans stories are now more accepted and more accessible. And my God, there's a long way to go, but it's exciting how much in 7 years the landscape has changed.
How different is it from the material itself? I mean, how close and historically accurate is it? Because you're making a movie, after all.
I mean, the original inspiration for Lucinda Coxon's wonderful script is David Ebersof's novel, The Danish Girl, which he freely says at the end is a fictionalization, a very loose fictionalization of the real people. I think Lucinda brought it back close to the real story. I researched. I'd commissioned more research into the real story. Interestingly, there's a lot of conflicting information about them. So sometimes when I was trying to get at the facts, I just found ambiguity rather than certainty. A lot of the stuff online is inaccurate, sadly. I'd prefer to see it as a fictionalization of their life rather than a documentary version of it. I mean, probably the biggest change is the time scale is compressed. I mean, the real Einar was born in 1882 and had the surgery a little bit later. But to tell the story of the transition over 20 years is structurally very demanding in screenplay terms, and just as in the King's Speech we kind of compress the time frame, I think Lucinda's decision to preserve David's compression of the time frame was dramatically necessary.
So Eddie, you're fondling a lot of fabrics, you're trying on stockings, you're getting really into some beautiful clothing and wigs and makeup. Did you like it?
Well, it's interesting because that side of things, I suppose, the physical side, is perhaps the most overt and obvious. But what was interesting from meeting trans women was that is not, that the physical side is secondary. It really is about what is going on in your mind, and so the most complex side, I suppose, was trying to track what Lily was going through, and it was also meeting in relation to what Tom was saying about the truth. It was interesting for us because we had the history, and we then had Lily's book, Man into Woman, that was written after she died. Also, it was published after she died, but some people question how reliable a source it is. Then you have David's fictionalized version. We met many trans women of different generations living now and heard their stories, and it was about trying to take all of that information, but also to remember the period. And realise that Lily didn't have the vocabulary or because she had no sort of predecessors. So that there was that sort of side of it, and with that came the physical element. One of the things that interested me most was some of the trans women I met described this period that they went through of hyperfeminization. That was the term they used to describe, which was as they were transitioning, perhaps playing with makeup and using perhaps too much, or wearing dresses that weren't sort of ultra feminine, but were perhaps
too. It's such a feminine thing, because I can, think about my own youth and my own teenage years, how I tried to find my own femininity.
Exactly, and in fact, one woman described it as being like an adolescence, like a girl's adolescence, and it was, and so for me, working with Jan Sewell and Paco, the costume designer, wanted to find those moments of Lily in that of the more sort of trying and perhaps going too far before finding herself. Really.
There was a more androgynous look at the end. I noticed a more Marlene Dietrich kind of appearance.
But what's extraordinary about Eddie, I have to say, is that he does a year of full-time work and preparation. He does extensive research, even reading gender theory, academic books on the subject, and yet in the moment of performance he's free. And some actors would be so kind of weighed down by the layers and layers of research and responsibility that they would become paralysed in front of the camera. And Eddie is able to sublimate this and become a character and you never feel that the research is getting in the way. And that's an incredible tribute to your gift.
Some of my favorite scenes are in the middle where you're wearing a slip and you're sort of exploring and you both seem to be creatively charged and Lily takes over your painting and you're having great sex and it's very intimate and sort of, it's like everything is supercharged.
Yeah, I mean they're on that journey when it's that very strong scene when Gerda opens up Einar's shirt and finds what in that scene you don't know what's going to happen. They don't know, and it's all about both of them finding another layer of themselves within that moment, a new moment, a journey, an experience that they haven't done before.
And trusting
And
each other.
trusting each other. And that is a scene where you also see the relationship that they have and how open they can be to one another and support one another.
And also, what's extraordinary about Lia's Einar is she fell in love with a woman who was open to the feminine side, to her feminine side, and through my research, there's some evidence that Gerda had a lesbian side to her sexuality, but it's not. I mean, again, it's when you actually look into it, it's very hard to sort of see it conclusively. But there's evidence.
You kind of went the other way.
And what's interesting is that I wanted to try to honour that by showing that actually in the early stages of transition, Gerda is completely open to Lily's femininity and
I truly
bringing
believe
that
that
complexity.
you see in this film that she was the person that stayed,
Yeah.
that wanted it to work. Who could,
Talk a little bit about the visuals. It's a stunningly beautiful movie. What was
it's
your
a beautiful film. It was
concept for
wonderful
how to
see.
shoot it?
Such a not only a great actress director, but you have such an eye visually in all your films in this film.
I mean, I was inspired in the Copenhagen section by the paintings of Hammershoy, who
Amazing.
one of the
Beautiful.
Danish
I kind of
artists.
grew up with those paintings from
Yeah.
Scandinavia, and I saw when I came in at the set department and saw those photos, I was like, wow, and it was like stepping into my own, it looks like, well, in Sweden a lot of the architecture looks very similar to Danish.
There's this sort of blue. Hammershoy tended to paint his own apartment, which is all this very specific shades of blue-grey, and there's a wonderful kind of austere, slightly claustrophobic quality to it that I felt expressed helped express that sense of Lily being trapped as Einar. And then when we moved to Paris, I had an incredible gift of inspiration from Lana Wachowski when I asked her advice before I started making the film, and she said, why don't you set the transition of Lily against the backdrop of the Art Nouveau, because the Art Nouveau movement was all about the rejection of the masculine, the rectilinear, the straight line, the embracing of the feminine in design, of the embracing of colour, and so we've done this shift from the kind of austere palette of Denmark into the Art Nouveau, so that you almost feel this 20th century revolution in the visual arts, which was about the acceptance of the feminine, becomes a backdrop which links to how the kind of shifting culture was making possible Lily's emergence.
Wow. So this was set very much in Europe, and with this visual palette, all of you were participating in this creative art. You were blocked, you were making art. Talk about why one went forward and the other went back in terms of your ability to paint.
Well, I think what she finds when she is an artist, and she of course has a inner voice, but it's that thing of, in one way, she finds her muse in Lily, and I think it's also the strength within her to be able to portray other strong women, and how she's able to, I think that it must be a very interesting thing, because your art in any form kind of expresses sometimes without you knowing your innest part of yourself and your feelings. I can realize whilst doing a part that I have emotions within me closer to me than I ever thought, maybe good or bad ones. And it's interesting that I think in one way the art kind of just pours out of her after the experiences that she's shared with Lily as Einar in the beginning, and it's almost not until way after, when she kind of goes back and look at the paintings, when she realised that it was there. And it's almost like she's telling her her subconscious is telling her this, her truest realizations.
But I mean, I'm very interested in the way Gerda's art is idealising. If you look at the real Gerda's art, she painted incredibly beautiful women and made them even more beautiful, and and there's a theme when she's painting Lily, that she paints a kind of almost a more perfect Lily than Lily could ever be, and the way I wanted the film to be haunted by the sense of beauty, because it was something that was key to her art. It was something key to his art, but it was also something about the promise at the end of the journey of transition, which links to ideas of femininity and ideas of beauty.
But Eddie, what is your character going through when she shuts down?
Well, I mean, one of the things I found interesting in relation to Lily's art when she was painting, when she was living as I know, is if you look at the paintings, they are so fastidious, and there is a sort of order to it. It was something that we talked about and certainly in the way Eve designed the set in that studio. You had Gerda's corner, which was incredibly extravagant, and there was sort of in chaos, and then in Lily's corner, when she was painting, there was, it was very formal, and the way in which she painted was very articulate, and that played into this idea for me of her boxing herself in her trying to keep together this exoskeleton of masculinity. And there was an amazing drawing of Lily when she was living as Ionel, with this long, high, starched collar, this incredibly tightly tailored suit, and for me it sang of exoskeleton, of like this masculinity that she and society had forced onto herself, and part of her finding herself was the literally physical unravelling of those things, and similarly her art had been a way of, certainly the way it plays in the story, of her looking back to her youth and looking to the bogs in Viola and this specific place where her memory of Lily is this undiscovered territory. It was about trying to control something that was sort of boiling inside.
Yeah, Lana Wachowski gave us this great quote that guided us, which was that she said that Einar's paintings were like little coffins where she kept reburying her secret, which I love this idea that it was this sort of, the fastidiousness was sort of somehow burying something that she didn't want to come out.
So the characters in the movie that are the two relationships, the Matthias Schweinart's relationship and then the Ben Whishaw, are they fictionalized characters?
Yeah, I mean, Hans and Henrik are both fictionalized and are drawn from David's novel, although the real Gerda did eventually find love with an Italian diplomat, but it didn't work out, and I think her marriage ended up lasting 3 years, and there's a strong sense from my research that the love of her life remained and was always Lily.
And Eddie, did you find some part of your feminine self that's going to stay with you in a good way?
Well, I think it was an amazing. The whole journey of it was interesting, as Alicia was saying, into the notion of masculine and feminine, and I realised as I started researching how little mind space I'd ever spent really considering gender. I mean, I went to an all-boys school in England. I played women when I was younger. My first professional part was playing Viola opposite Mark Rylance in Twelfth Night, and that was, so there is a tradition in the same way that a couple of years ago in London there was an all-female Julius Caesar. There is quite a sort of, and but what I found interesting was I had
back to Shakespeare as well.
Yeah, it does, but was taking on this notion. I had always assumed that the world was male, female, masculine, feminine, accepting that binary notion without ever having questioned it, and suddenly realising that what is masculine? Like, are we saying in this day and age that masculine is being good at sport or being good at mechanics, or like, and feminine is what, being arty? And it feels so antiquated, and this notion that gender is on a spectrum and that we all find ourselves within some place within that is, for me, was the great lesson that I learned, and certainly within myself, there are sort of elements of all sorts, and it's been so interesting to uncover them.
I also got fascinated by this notion that never in my life as a director have I ever said to a male actor, "Oh, sorry, at that moment you betrayed your gender, you weren't male," or you'd never say to a woman, "Oh, at that moment you weren't actually you came out of your gender, which kind of means that you're never really directing someone in terms of their gender or thinking about how gender is innate or constructed. And so what was fascinating about this journey was having to actually think about, to what extent, when you're directing it, the balance between gender as identity, gender as construction, how it's, how we acquire the signs of it, and it was, that made it a really interesting journey.
Well, Alicia, you must have run into a few male directors in your time who had certain ideas of what was feminine and what an actress should do.
Yeah, but like he said, I haven't thought about it. That's a really interesting thought. I've never had a director tell me that now I wasn't, now you went away from your femininity.
Yeah.
You should probably do a retake there. And so that's interesting.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.